stream key is okay. And then everything will start, will kick up like it's supposed to, which it looks like. Yes, it's starting. Let's see. Let us know if we are live and we'll get going because it's as usual. As usual, everyone. It's been a strange week to say, hey Buster, can you hear us okay, buddy? Hey Dark Slayer, how are you guys? All right, we're live. You can hear us okay? All right, perfect. All right, so Chick, we're leading with this spider thing because it's weird. It's weird. Spiders apparently everyone can fly magically and they can fly on electricity. Everyone says they can hear you, Chick.
Oh, awesome. Hi, everybody.
So what's up with this spiders flying? That's kind of strange and bizarre, but apparently they can go across the ocean and everything.
I think that it's probably the most wonderful news, at least I've heard in a long time, because it's bringing a lot of things to mind for me. And I think probably a lot of the people that watch us kind of are getting similar vibes. There was always that question, how did the ancient empires move these blocks and make these things that we're unable to do now? How are they able to carry these things? How are they able to do all of these things? And now we can clearly see that from time to time, age to age, and even year to year, reality is different. And what I think is literally going on, I feel like this is a charge that's building within reality where it's almost like the ancient times are like coming back again. And I know it's very small right now where it's just the spider can use, the electrical charge and basically like levitate or hover or glide over the surface of the earth. But the fact that it's strong enough now to carry the spider, even though the spider is very small, if that charge keeps building over the next 1,000 years or however long, because these things can take a long time, you could literally be right back where we were before the decline of the great empires. Like I think my personal theory is that this charge, this ability that was around before started to decline and all of their technology stopped working, and that's why they all declined so crazily. Like especially when people that have studied Egypt could never figure out why did it go into such a decline, and there were other civilizations that were far advanced of what we have today and they went into this wild decline. And like I said, my personal theory is reality changed on them and they weren't able to do the things that they had always done. And we got to a point where there was no that charge was basically non-existent, especially towards the very end of the last age, like before 2001. So it became like a mythological thing almost. And now it's like, no, it's very real. It's very back. We can see that we're in a totally different type of reality in all kinds of ways now. And we are the few lucky ones that get to see that this is a cycle of where you have a very literal age, like the one that we came from, where you have to do everything yourself and there's no special thing externally you can rely on to do physical things and get things done. And whereas in this age, it's kind of like the opposite of that. There are actually other things you can do, and things that were unbelievable just 20 years ago are now literally reality today.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really great and unique and kind of wonderful point of view to look at that. I mean, I didn't even think of it that way. What if, empires decline and everything, they come and go. It's not from, cultural decline or political decline or moral decline or anything like that. It has to do with with something like the way in which, electricity moves through the ether, or whether or not there is an ether, or whether or not something like, whether it's the primary source or it's the side effect, the Mandela effect, whether it's something primary or whether it's not something primary. What if societies and civilizations rise and fall based off of these exterior factors that have nothing to do? Because I think the problem, nothing to do with morality or cultural decline or religious decline, because I think that in the West, a lot of there seems to be this feeling of, or at least it's particularly on YouTube, it's this feeling of decay and decadence and the decline of Western civilization, and everything's about to come to a screeching halt because there's more permissiveness in society in terms of morality and all of these other things. And what if it's a completely different factor altogether? And these cycles, they do keep repeating themselves, and that, in a way, because you're talking this way, it makes me think how self-centered humans are, and particularly people in the West, to think that we have this kind of power to do this, and we have this kind of ability to determine the fate of a civilization simply by the individual choices that we make. And it's a pretty astonishing kind of change in the way that you see things, and that would be astonishing if it starts with spiders that can float along this, or can master this kind of thing, and then other creatures start to maneuver and master it as well. And the thing that I would see next would be something bigger. I would consider an uptick, like, if squirrels, because I know there's flying squirrels, but what they really do is they glide on a gentle decline. If squirrels or something larger, a larger mammal, if it were to move to a larger mammal and it were to able to glide or something like that, or some in some form use the electricity that's out there, that would be interesting. And to add one last thing to that, the way you're thinking, Chick, what would make it also interesting is this Einstein. I guess it's a Mandela effect. I don't know, but the Einstein, apparently in 1920, he accepted ether. The
Yeah,
ether. Okay.
finally some justice for Tesla there with that like particular change is that Einstein like in this timeline changed his mind and started doing lectures about how Tesla was right and no one wanted to hear it. And people didn't even bother showing up to his lectures.
Man, that's brand new to me. That is brand new. Now, I've got the Google link in here. You just type this in. I mean, just it's not letting me. It's too many characters. But just the only thing you have to do is type in Einstein and ether. That's all I typed in Google, and what it says here for it is in 1920, Einstein accepting the ether theory. Albert Einstein said, recapitulating, we must say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. Now, you've got to remember the ether is closely coupled and closely tied to religious, occult, almost anything having to do with the non-materialist, atheist, reductivist point of view. The ether was very much enmeshed in sort of all these ancient cultures. So this too adds to that, saying that perhaps the ether itself gets charged, and that's how spiders now have lifted themselves off now. And perhaps there's a new kind of charge that comes in, and this is a new way in which that narrow band I always talk about with the electromagnetic spectrum and the electromagnetic waves and all of the narrow band in which human beings exist and see and all of that. Finally, the ether that's all around us is starting to supercharge itself in a new way. Now I'm starting to think about the Schumann resonance, and if that has something to do with that. I'm just all over the place with what you said.
It's exciting times because it's a weird. It's almost something that's I don't know how this is going to sound, but it's something that was closer to like a muscle memory. And then the more kind of things that I saw, the more I was kind of like, I'm familiar with this. And I know that like for certain people that might not make sense, but I think like fifth dimensionally, where time isn't linear, you can come to a conclusion that you've learned in the past or the future whenever. You just need to be clear headed enough to see it. And that's, I believe, what's happening with people right now, or at least the Mandela affected people, is we're getting a clearer and clearer vision of what's going on. We know there's been, some kind of amnesia wipe or memory manipulation or various memories stacked on top of each other
Mm-hmm.
is actually happening. I think a lot of us were very, very bummed out with coming to a reality where the sun was reversed, like the polarity of the sun was reversed and it was white and the light is different and everything. We didn't like that, but we never considered that perhaps the Earth also switched polarity, and not like the magnetic field that, the North and South Pole switch places. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how this charge, instead of wherever it's been for this past age, perhaps going inwards or something, is actually going outwards, and it's something that is probably going to have a big effect on, the human population, but also on nature and on how these things work for however long these ages go on for. And I'm just feeling really confident about it. It's more of a gut feeling, but the gut feeling is also bringing me to different things that are oddly linking up, like just how you happen to mention, like Einstein and Tesla. Tesla understood these things, and he said if you could get the correct charge going into basically the ether and the world, he thought the whole system would turn on and it would function kind of like one consciousness or one big brain. He had some really interesting ideas about if you just have the correct charge, you could actually like switch on the machine that is Earth, or because they always talk about Saturn being a machine, but I've never before considered if there was some kind of spiritual machine aspect to Earth. That's very far out there, and there's very little to to actually read about in these kind of thought patterns, because mostly these things are overlooked, and it's only been so recently that we have proof coming to our faces that this is actually what's going on. It's not just conjecture anymore. I'm sure in Tesla's day, a lot of people just thought he was crazy because they could see his inventions, but they just had no idea what he was talking about, because the charge of this field, and I don't even have the language for it, it was so low back then that I have no idea how he was conscious of it. He was just a genius.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've really changed my paradigm here. And Steve Turner, thank you so much for the super chat, and we really appreciate that. So, all right. So I remember, at least maybe it was 6, maybe it was 8 months ago, Chick. We were actually talking about the ether, and we were talking about how fringe it was and the idea of it actually coming back sometime. And I saw that Einstein and ether, I don't know what made me go to it, but I looked it up real quick as I was typing in ether, because whenever I saw that spiders were basically floating on electricity, and they say it's almost like on this silk line. There's like this invisible silk web that's out there or something, and they're kind of just going across it, um, across the ocean with it. It just makes me think. First off, where are they going and what are they thinking about? But second off, too, I wonder if this is a permanent or semi-permanent sort of kind of like we have railroads or we have roads or we have highways or we have something like this. Is there some kind of silk road for spiders that has now become so supercharged with the electromagnetic spectrum that's inside of this ether, that's inside of the ELF that we live through, and the EMFs and all the other things that we live through, that somehow this is all rising? And I had never even considered that possibility, that if certainly the sun was changing, of course that's not going to be the only thing that's going to be changing. The earth itself should also be changing now that we're over here on Orion. Why wouldn't it change? It's so obvious. So you've dropped a lot of different truth bombs here. So it's Spider Highway, exactly, Buster. So it's it's a lot, it's a real paradigm change, and we're breaking a lot of ground with this episode right here. And given the background that we've already explored with exactly how reality works in itself, in terms of the framework of Gateway, in terms of the framework of the psychotronic universe, in terms of the the framework of round robin, and given all of those other things, all of those things come together to absolutely tell us that yes, if consciousness is going to come first, naturally that consciousness has to be animated in some way, through the electricity, through an electrical field. So of course it's going to be that. Now that's so interesting, that if Tesla were ahead of his time in a literal sense, not just that his thinking was ahead of his time, but he was actually literally ahead of his time in that he would have been unstoppable to charge the ether as it grows in electrical power as it is now. So spiders are floating on this electrical grid that already is this invisible electrical grid that's all over the planet now because of, I don't know if it's a Mandela effect. Was there a charge from a Schumann spike? Was there a charge from, something CERN did? I don't know. I don't know. Whatever happened, spiders are the first ones that human beings have taken notice to. Whatever gets to whatever, if the amplitude goes higher and higher with each one of these measures that happens, whether it is Schumann or something else, maybe perhaps it will show us that Tesla was ahead of his time in that he was in the wrong century, and now all his inventions, he could have literally let them go and they would have gone viral over the internet, and we would have had something like a free electricity now. Versus back then, like you were talking about, because I'm really just piggybacking off of what you said. What you talked about was that the electromagnetic density was so low in the ether that he had to invent these other things to artificially elevate the electricity in the ether. Remember, it's like it looks like it looks like this round ball thing, that he's sitting near. It looks like a globe, and that is sitting on it's sitting on almost like a column. Have you seen those pictures before of him with
I
it?
have, yes.
Right, right. So what if now we were all able to take common household items and use whatever incredibly complicated systems that he had to create as these Schumann spikes happen, as the elevation happens to the ether. Suddenly we have this massive charge that's everywhere. Now we need him. Like now we need him to sort of shift into this time frame so we can understand what it was he was talking about.
And thankfully, not at the time because it was terrible for him, but the US wasn't really interested in his patents and different countries bought them up. So therefore, they're available. They haven't
Mm.
been buried because we didn't buy them because we weren't interested in them at the time. And now they're very, very relevant, and people can look into his patents and see what he was working on and what he was doing. And yeah, I just think it's a tragedy that he died so poor and so unappreciated. And everybody said Einstein is great, Einstein is great, and even Einstein himself was like, I don't know anything next to this guy. Why will nobody listen to this guy? It's nice to see someone vindicated, even if it's long after their time. I think you're totally right, and I think the charge will build, and I think that the ancient ruins are there to suggest that things much bigger than spiders were floating around because there's the Nazca lines, there's things in England, like there's all these like massive picture made out of stone basically or dug out in rocks that you could only see from far far above. And archaeologists were always like, why would you make a massive big not statue, but just like a massive big presentation that you can't even see from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably they didn't have airplanes back then. Well, I think that a lot of things are going to start tying together and making a lot more sense. And I know we haven't gotten into the crystal aspect of it yet, but one of the things that kicked this all off and actually ties into Tesla too was like I read about Tesla saying, if you apply correct charges to crystals, it's almost like the hate, love, ignore experiment with rice that's been working lately.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like how water changes pattern. When you freeze it, if you play like really nice music to it or you play death metal at it, it actually freezes in different patterns. It's the same idea with the crystal. It's like if you charge it, because you can get an electrical charge out of quartz crystals if you apply pressure or if you apply electrical charges to them, and it actually compresses the like individual I don't want to say atoms, but like the individual components or the within the crystal, and when it like springs back into its proper form, that's when it emits an electrical charge. And never before have I heard that crystals were spongy and that you could basically deform their shape, their crystallized pattern, and that they would bounce back into shape. because you always think of them as being completely solid, and if you try to change their shape, that they'd just shatter.
Well, I'm sorry. So you're saying crystals now can be what? What? They can be sculpted or something? I've been.
So basically, like if you research about, they have, at least on the Orion arm, ways of getting quartz crystals to emit electrical charges by either putting big pressure on them or by hitting them with an electric charge. And they basically, their shape deforms, and then they go back into their correct shape. And that's on the smallest level. And, I can't think of the correct terminology right now because a crystal doesn't have cells, but I want to say like cells. It's like, because crystals are made up of miniature crystals. It's like very. Um, I don't have the correct terminology, but I'm just trying to describe that that's something that's coming in with these changes too. Is that one, crystals can emit electricity, they can store it, they glow orange when you hit them with electrical charges here in the Orion arm, uh, which is all going to be part of this new technology that's rising with this charge. And that technology is not going to work until the charge gets strong enough. Like, it's not going to work properly. It's coming back to life, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm looking at this thing from Wiki. It's called piezoelectricity, and it's the electric charge that accumulates in certain solid materials, such as crystals, in certain ceramics. And it says it's from a pressure and a latent heat. It is derived from the Greek word whatever, and which means amber, an ancient source of electric charge. And they
Oh,
talk.
that's crazy. That's us.
Yeah, let me.
Bernstein means amber in German.
Right when we talked about amber, that's why this is shaking me up, because we've talked about amber more than once on this show, and the what, I don't understand. It's talking about amber, and it's like I am just not understanding. Whoa, Stephanie G, thank you so much. Holy cow, we really appreciate that. Like we said, all the proceeds are going to go to this dream webpage. It's going to be awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That's awesome. But I just pasted that in there, chick, and into the chat, and it's I've never heard of this before. See, this is Orion. This is totally Orion, man. It says it is exploited in a number. It's actually being used in useful applications right now, and it talks about scanning probe microscopes and propane barbecues. What? Oh, this is so weird. And it's talking about the using crystals. Oh, this is, and I know that there was one. It says how to use crystals to generate. Yeah, sciencing.com. How to use crystals to generate electricity. And let's see, this one is saying here, crystals such as quartz can be tapped for electricity using that piezoelectric mechanical energy discharge method by securing crystal. Let's see here. I'll paste that one in here. Let's see. I'll paste, and I'll put. That's so crazy. And let's see if it talks about what other uses, if anything. It's not really. It's a small article, but they say they use it about the size of a dime. Wow, chick, this is huge. This
This
is
is big. This is turn the corner stage right here.
Look. I'm pasting it in there, everybody. There you go. Okay. So Einstein. Okay, all right. This is so weird. This is so much going on right now. All right, so in the last 24 minutes, we figured out that Einstein has admitted in Orion that there is an ether. Spiders are floating on this electrical grid that is somehow, I would say safely, that it's associated with the ether. That crystals, they are using this form of electricity in order to emit the electricity and can bend and move based on that. It's just weird. I mean, this is weird. There's so much strangeness.
But it kind of makes sense. I mean, like there's so many other things that I'm just like so inspired to go into, but I don't want to make the stream too insane because we're always in danger of that. But just looking into the human is the temple, and the ancient civilizations believed and understood that, and they actually built buildings to mirror the different parts of the human because they understood the whole concept of like the kingdom of heaven being within, and there's all kinds of things, not just heaven within, but more than you would expect is within the person that is, awake enough to access such things. So a lot of people have suggested more recently, and I've been seeing this go around the internet, that the pyramids are actually mirroring the Orion type brain, and that as this charge rises, is actually a great way to basically funnel that charge into one concentrated point at the tip of the pyramid, at the apex of it. So it's kind of mirroring like a crown chakra in a human head, but it's like on an earth, like it's outside of a person, obviously. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of technologies that are built on the outside that mirror what's going on the inside. It's going to be very holographic, very insane. A lot of crazy things are going to be happening. Of course, you would need a very strong charge coming from the Earth to pull it up enough to bring it to the apex point. But they're saying even in the year 2000, when the charge was very, very low, if you stood on top of the pyramids, you like at the very top, you could hear somebody clearly talking if they were standing, on the pyramid next to you at the very top, even though you were way too far away to actually hear each other. You could hear each other clearly. So clearly, there's a bend there in reality, and I'm sure that there was a lexicon of language to describe all of these things, but it's been such a long time that literally civilizations and languages have died out in the meantime, and we don't know what words to use for this. But I'm sure a lot of the Mandela effect people inside remember this. They're familiar with it on some kind of a level that they're just barely starting to understand.
Mm. And so Jennifer said that this piezoelectricity is how your bones know which direction to grow, and it's also how orgonite works. Excuse me, it's piezoelectricity. So that also brings up a really important point of that I've always made. That's more of a philosophic thing, but it also matters. First, let me talk about the philosophic thing. The thing about science is it always talks about the how, but not the why. This piezoelectricity thing is really important because it gives you the idea of why does a tree bother to do what it does. What makes a tree come from non-existence into existence. And I understand when it gets back into existence, when it's finally here in existence, that it must obey the laws that are within this vibrational frequency. But what makes a tree want to actually do that, to ignite itself into this reality? I understand, like a human being, and we have these very elaborate systems of religion and spiritual belief and all these other things that ignite someone to want to come into this band of frequency that we call reality. But everything else, what makes it do that, and what makes it want to do that, what makes it follow those rules? And for me, obviously the answer is there is a creator. I've always said that. I think atheism to me is gibberish, but and I've never made I've never hid that. I've always been very open about that. But in terms of what structure, a system you want to follow, what human system you want to follow, that's really up to you. But for me, like when it gets in here, and when Jennifer was explaining that, that was very important, and and that I never thought about that, And what does keep a human being all their guts together? What makes it want to follow these rules? It's the how, not the why. That's the core question to all these things. So that was a side thing. But another thing too is because now that we're asking this kind of question in terms of all of these kinds of strange electrical things that are happening right now, such as these spiders floating along, it makes you really think then perhaps all of the laws that, the template for a tree, or a template for, what makes, spiders want to behave the way that they do, or ducks, or anything else. Could it be that all of those rules are actually captured within the ether? And then that's it. That's where it's all at. The DNA of existence is within the ether. How about that? There's DNA that human beings have within their body that tells you exactly who you are, what you're about, whether you're where you're going to get sick. Could you imagine if existence itself has its own Gattaca?
Indeed.
Oh my gosh, we're deep diving on this one, everybody. So
And just as you mentioned, what keeps your guts together and intestines, like something else that has just kind of like popped out of my memory is like, Tesla and his copper coiling, that was mirroring the human body too, because when the charge is really high, your intestines are like your copper coiling to help you keep that charge and be able to work with it. And the mesentery started existing to coat the intestines,
mhm.
as in like we didn't need the mesentery organ when the charge was really low, and the intestines were only digesting food and giving you like a mild gut instinct about this or that, because there are like basically brain cells in the intestines too. And mainstream science has said, oh, that goes back to the dinosaurs because they were so big they couldn't wait for the signal to come from their brains to go the whole way down to their tails, so they kind of had a brain in their stomach as well. But I think there's something else going on with the stomach and the intestines. We're going to see, I think anyway, a lot of changes, and a lot of this, like I said, is just I think. So if it goes a different direction or anything like that, I just want people to understand this is conjecture, but it's also looking at what's going on around us, and even in mainstream articles, what's being admitted to.
Oh, absolutely. And that's just the thing about these mainstream articles, like with the spiders. It's like, uh, the Navy's saying there's UFOs. I mean, I don't have to go down the list because I've done it so many times. And if you're new to the channel, there's 2 years worth of exploring for you to do. And there's 2 years worth of just the twists and turns that we've all that we've all been through together. Steve, thanks again for that. And I'm into Organite and everything like that, and I'm into exploring things like that, especially adrenaline being crystals in our blood. And this goes back to this book, man. I'm so angry that I lost this book. It started to talk about um, the heart, and how the heart works, and um, how it vibrates into existence, certain parts of the heart, and then it disappears. And the way that it does, it mimics certain parts of the human reproductive cycle, let's call it. And it was a very interesting book, because you think about the heart, and the heart is associated with human romance and human love, and all of those things, and with that usually entails other human beings being created. And there's this balance, this natural balance, that goes back to the questions that we were talking about earlier, of the how and the why. How this all fits together, and how the bones know to grow and to stop, or to want to do that. To me, to me, is something that is so stunning, and so it's just odd and bizarre now that we've come this far, and to realize, why doesn't everything just fall apart at any given moment? It's just so strange. And in fact, the Mandela effect itself, it acts in a lot of ways. It actually acts as a reminder to us of how actually stable things are, that we're only having these kinds of changes. If Am I being too bold? Have we been down this? Oh my gosh, chick, have we been down this rabbit hole so long that now I'm actually thinking that the Mandela effect is a way to actually reflect and think about how stable reality is versus what it could be?
I think, yes, I think that you've been down the rabbit hole so long that the Mandela effect is now looking like the tame side effect of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Because, all right, so let's do that. Let's do a nice, easy shift over from that to this. This Planet Nine, folks. I don't know if this is one of those things where they're going to ease in on it with us, but they're saying Planet Nine may actually be a black hole. Take that. I take it with a grain of salt, but it's certainly something that you want to. When they talk about outer space to me, I take it with a big, big grain of salt because I think outer space in a lot of ways is science fiction. However, I think outer space in a lot of ways is a reality in that everything else that we've studied about Gateway that teaches us about consciousness and our ability to believe in something and the way consciousness um, comes before matter, reality, substance. The desk or that you're sitting at or the chair you're sitting on and all that stuff. So we talked about it. There's, Planet X, Planet Nine, or, Nibiru. It comes around 26,000 year cycle, blah, 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 and they're starting to talk about it again. And I don't know. I don't know, Chick. What do you think about this one?
Just like one thing, because some people were saying that it's in lighters and everything that when you hit crystals off each other, they emit a charge. I actually started with somebody had posted just using a counter against a crystal that nothing was happening to it to see that there was a low like electro field around it. So I'm
Hmm.
not just talking about that when you do something to the crystal it reacts, but that the charge is building and there's actually a small like electrical field around crystals, just as like quartz crystals, like just as they are right now. So that I didn't actually say that, and I should have when I was trying to say like there's um, you know, uh, basically starting to be proof of the charge building. But then on Planet Nine being a black hole, that it, to me is all kinds of esoteric and all kinds of crazy because in the Orion Arm, they believe that the number nine means completion or endings or
Mm-hmm.
the end. So the fact that they're saying that number nine may be a black hole to me is very interesting. And also, I'd like to say to them, why is it a black hole when we know in Orion that we're at the other end of black holes, and that's why we have white holes here.
And that is nuts. And yes, in terms of matter and existence, everyone knows, particularly on this channel, 99.999% of existence, scientists openly admit that we have no idea about. Um, and now we know that here in Orion, we have black holes as well as white holes. Black holes, they pull in, white holes, they emit. And, if you've never heard of white holes, that's fine. I hadn't until a few weeks back. Maybe it's been a month and a half or so. But there certainly seems to be like this strange balance now within the universe that we didn't have in Sagittarius that we have here on Orion, and I'm not entirely sure what the yeah, it seems very esoteric. It's very occult, meaning hidden occult is what I'm saying. And it's I don't know. Now someone is saying they're just trotting that out to scare people. I think a lot of people they're not really paying attention to these kinds of articles, and they're not really paying attention to us. Now, that's not to say that they're not trotting out an article like this to scare a small portion of the population like us, our kind of folks that are into this kind of stuff, of course. But still yet when they were talking about what was that big galactic spaceship thing that was an asteroid and yet it was a Death Star. Was it like Moo or something like that? What was the name of that thing? Uh, do you remember, Chick?
I don't
I
remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But when that thing was coming through, and that was going to be the end of everything, and we heard endless stories about the end of the world with that one, and that never happened. So I don't know. I thought this was interesting because you hear stories about Nibiru coming close to Earth and it bringing with it, or Planet Nine, Planet X. They all seem to mash together to me, but it seems to be on a 26,000 year cycle. It gets close to Earth and it mashes up a lot of things. However, if it is a completion, if it is a number nine, if it does actually suck us through something and then spit us out through something else, then certainly that would explain why we're in the situation we are. However, I would also like to posit. There you go, umau umau. Thank you, Buster. He typed it in the chat there. But so I would also like to say that this harkens back to earlier parts of this channel when I was talking about echoes after a major event which created the Mandela effect. And whether it was literal or metaphorical or whatever, about the world ending and us being in sort of this echo or this ripple afterwards, certainly seeing every now and then, like when you're bobbing in the ocean, and if you bob really low on a wave, you can't see maybe like a ship or something, then suddenly the wave bobs you up and you can see the ship, and then you bob down again and you can't see the ship, and then you bob back up and you can see the ship. See, now that's the way waves work, and that could be an echo. And perhaps this could have been the thing that, was the mass extinction event in 2012. And this is speculation on my part, but I feel comfortable now, 2 years into this, talking about this, that it could have been something like that, where it was a black hole and we were spit out, which would be kind of poetic considering a black hole swallows us in Sagittarius, the world ends, and then we're spit out in Orion, and or if there's some sort of ether that is kind of a web through all of existence, suddenly the backup system comes alive. So I don't know. I'm rambling at this point, Chick.
I think that there could indeed have been something like that involved, because we've even seen, like with portrayals of the Milky Way, that the arms have different names or different lengths, or there's a different amount of arms. So it's like it's not even that we just went from one arm of the Milky Way to another. It's that we sometimes end up in different Milky Ways. So even though, like, I've spent most of the time bouncing around Orion, I've been like, according to what you can read online about where your location is in space. Apparently, I've been in many different places, but mostly Orion. Um, I think that there has to be some kind of a reason why we particularly made it through that experience. Now, whether it was like what the Mayans were saying, that was, in 2012, that was the reset, or that was the end, or that was the end of that age, or if a black hole did get us, but somehow we were spared, and we ended up coming out of the white hole and ended up here. However, that all went down. My suspicion, not to get too hung up on the rising charge, but my suspicion is we might be the people that were perhaps more in tune with this new reality that's coming in, and perhaps that's why we didn't just disappear into nothing. We're actually like very useful to whatever this new thing is coming in, or we're actually meant to be here at this time talking about this. And that's conjecture completely, but I just have a gut feeling about it that it wasn't an accident, that out of all of the people in the worlds that we came from, we're the ones that made it, and we're the ones that outlasted everything, which is a huge thought, and still a huge thought to me today, is to outlive the world you came from. There has to be a pretty specific reason. I mean, if it was just one person, you say, okay, that's an accident, but all of us are here. I don't think that's an accident.
No, no. I don't think that's an accident whatsoever, and I think there's a reason why. And I don't like to harp on it because I don't want to dehumanize anyone, but I also think that NPCs play a big part of this. And I sometimes toy with the idea that there's only a handful of us, like literally on the planet, and the rest is just this background noise. But that goes away because I can't. I don't want to think that way because it would be too easy to dehumanize everyone around me, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that kind of person. I still want to maintain some semblance of what I was. I will say, getting off that subject, I must say that I saw the most epic line of this episode, and perhaps um, this could become something. Lanessa said NASA is candy. That is, I don't know what that was in reference to. I don't care because it's brilliant. And that would be a t-shirt right there. NASA is candy. And then just don't explain it. Just boom, NASA's candy. That's it. And it's so cool because if you think about it on so many levels, there's it makes sense, right, chick? That it's candy, and you know what candy I mean, it's good. It tastes good. It makes you feel good for a second and everything. But ultimately, it's garbage. It's bad for your teeth. It's no, I don't know. It's just crap.
Indeed, I think that would be a great t-shirt.
That's
And I'm just
awesome.
like, when it comes to trolling NASA, there's just like three words that I definitely like to throw at them. It's low Earth orbit.
Low Earth orbit, NASA. Man, they get so much. I mean, and we've slung so much mud at them. We have like, we have slung so much crap at them. It's like, man, it's fish in a barrel. And they say the craziest things. And then all you have to do is wait. Right, Lanessa, that is total merch, man. NASA is candy. You have got to, I won't steal it. I promise. You've got to run out there and copyright that because that may be the line of like the last 10 years or something. But, what was that? That's so funny. Was it? They change stuff so often, and I don't want this to devolve into just me and you sniping at them. But okay, maybe we could for a second. But they change it so often. You take a picture at that stupid thing that quote unquote went to the moon. I just I don't know. I don't know what to do. Are you there? Are you there, chick?
We had to send someone up to the moon to tend to the graveyards up there.
Oh God, I love it. I love it. Taste the rainbow. Someone said NASA's candy for suckers. That's pretty good. It gives me cavities. I love it. See, it does it right. It opens. It's a conversation piece. It really is. It's a conversation piece there. And yeah, exactly. NASA's telling us that we're shuttling. No, 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 no. Sorry. We're not just shuttling. Nay. No, no, no. Not just shuttling. We're ejecting like cannon wise corpses and slamming them into the moon. If you guys don't remember that episode, you've got to go dig down and find it. It was hilarious. I was in tears. We were just dying because of just the ridiculous things that they say sometimes.
Yeah, just saying it with a straight face, like, oh yeah, everybody knows that.
Mm-hmm. Oh
It's
yeah,
just like,
totally.
what?
Yeah, man.
What are you talking about? My
Just
gosh.
just roll her old bones, like in Ferris Bueller about his grandma, and the principal doesn't believe him that his grandmother has passed, and he's like, okay, fine, prove it. Roll her old bones up here, and we'll take a look, and then we'll give you your day off. And you think about that with NASA. It's like, okay, show us the corpses, show us the big clown cannon, shoot the things out there, and then I'll believe you whenever I see a smoke cloud on the moon.
Oh my gosh. I just
Oh,
hope they use that Tesla CGI,
oh.
the car floating in outer space technology. That's just what I want. It would just make my day very happy to see some CGI clown cannons
That's
sending
awesome.
all kinds of things up to a CGI moon, and hopefully they don't even get like the moon correct and they put like the face on the moon like we remember, so it doesn't even look like the moon here. Oh, please do some really wrong bad CGI, NASA.
Oh
I'd love it.
God.
That'd be my birthday present right there.
Well, and Stephanie did ask, did everyone ever come something big in their life? Well, I think September 20th, we all felt that huge spike, and ever since then, things have been kind of a bit surreal. So I don't know about you guys, but it just seems kind of weird. And I know spikes have been happening after that, like quite a bit, but what Chick was alluding to, if anybody is kind of new to the channel, there was a time where we were talking about it every week about the moon, about something weird happening on the moon, but in particular, how the face on the moon was changing. One day it would be upside down, the next it would be kind of sideways. Now it doesn't really look like the face when we were kids. And I remember that moon. I remember it was a very in my mind's eye. I can see it very clearly because I looked at it every day. And the way the moon is supposed to work is the same side is supposed to face the Earth, and that's it. And now every day we get a different moon.
Yeah, and like as we talked about before, the lore of the moon is not a face on the moon. It's a rabbit making rice cakes or a rabbit making the elixir of life is what
Mm.
they say is the picture on the moon now. Whereas for us, it was, the man on the moon or the face on the moon. And the craters are just so different that I suppose it wouldn't make sense for it to be the man on the moon because it doesn't look like, it doesn't look like that at all anymore.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. So Joseph is talking about. He wasn't here when we were talking about the Sagittarius to Orion. So what we're talking about is a clip. It's a residue of. It's been so long. What scientist was pointing to the Sagittarius arm, and he said Sagittarius is where we're at. I'm trying to remember. Do you remember, Chick?
Uh, the clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson saying that we're in the Sagittarius arm when we're clearly not, or
Well,
is it some other? Um,
no, it was Sagan, Carl Sagan.
oh,
Joseph, it's from the 70s. I think it's still out there. Hopefully we haven't shifted out of it. But it's a clip of him, and it shows the Sagittarius arm, and he points to a specific place, and he goes, "Here we are in the Sagittarius arm, and this is where Earth approximately is in the Sagittarius arm." And then later on, we come to find out through a million other methods, Joseph, that we're not just in Orion, but we are in Orion Spur, or we're in Orion, or we're in a version of Orion, and that's when we say, okay, we used to be in Sagittarius, and now we're in Orion. And what happened after that is there was a just a deluge of literature and videos and other things from that time period around the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, talking about Earth being in Sagittarius. And now in modern times, they talk about Earth being in Orion. So that's where we get the whole mythology of Sagittarius and Orion. I too, the reader, and you said something pretty epic as well, that I survived my death. That's brilliant. Someone also said, if we're gonna be talking really epic, since Lanessa really set the bar so high, um, the most epic thing that I've heard is this person was cutting my hair and said, "All the saints are dead now." I was like, that is just brilliant. So I thought
good
that was good.
grief, that's stark. Conversation for a haircut, but
Well,
okay.
yeah, well, she was from Iran, and she was saying like different sayings and stuff that they had, and I was like, and she had said that, and I'm like, that makes sense, because in order to be, canonized, you got to be dead. So I was like, that makes sense. All the saints are dead now, so no matter where you're at, you got to be, if you want to be a saint, at least, according to Christendom, you got to be dead. So that makes sense. I was like, that's very interesting.
I think that for people that want, as Yosa was saying here, absolute specific personal proof, thanks. It's like if you don't personally remember that you were on Sagittarius, how can anyone bring you proof that you were? So unfortunately, unless you have the information yourself, anything that somebody brings to you could be from a different reality than where you're from, or it could be from a different, there's no way for anyone to prove to you what your lifetime was when you're talking interdimensional, because we don't know where you're from and nobody can hand it to you. That you have to do it yourself. You have to say, I remember this, I remember that. Just look at the human skull. If that's not proof enough for you, look at the human brain, look at the human skull. It's nothing like it was. And if you don't remember what it looked like where you came from, nobody can prove to you that it's changed. It's
Yeah.
sorry, it's all personal responsibility. I can't, I can bring you everything in the world and you're still going to say it's BS because he's saying that we're talking BS and he wants absolute specific personal proof of everything. I'm sorry, that's not how the Mandela effect works because we're probably not even from the same place and my proof probably doesn't mean anything to you.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I just read that part of it. For Joseph or Yosef or yeah, no, that's not. That's totally not how ME works at all. Not even close in terms of trying to get very very specific. No, we've been down that, and really, it is. There's not much else I can add to what Chick says other than to say that it's a very personal experience, and We're long, 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 long beyond trying to convince people. This is a channel for people who are already beyond even level 2 or 3. You kind of have to be at least mid to high level ME. There's no, just it's really is. So we're actually at the point now that this is morphing into us just bringing up these kinds of things to further understand from a more subtle perspective of how reality is on a constant move and is constantly changing. So but yeah, I mean, that World War II thing is what really changed it for me when we were doing those changes, and we were exploring World War II. And as we explored World War II, it kept changing and it kept getting worse and worse for the Allies, and it kept getting better and better for um, for the for the Axis powers that we knew we had to stop. And I know a lot of people may think that that sounds insane, but I'm really, I don't I have I just I don't care. So
It's yeah, we have to stop even researching. I mean, just in a completely normal way, researching World War II and looking back into the articles, because the more we dug at it, the more chaotic it got.
mm-hmm,
So it was kind of like, okay, well then for Mandela affected people at least, perhaps digging too far into any direction may actually cause your results to change.
mm-hmm,
Almost like you were saying the last episode, is if you dig too deep, things fall apart on the quantum level. Things not even on the quantum level were going pretty crazy, and then when we stopped digging into it, it stopped being insane.
mm-hmm.
So we, at least through trial and error, were able to see what actually could and does happen, at least with us, in regards to these things. I don't know about non-affected people. I don't know if things change, like if they research into it too much. But since we have a huge gang of Mandela affected people here, I was like, well, if such things can happen from even just researching something, then it says to me that there's actually a lot of clout and a lot of influence there for
Mm-hmm.
us to actually influence things for the better.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if we actually focus on really good things that we're passionate about, maybe it actually makes those things have a bigger presence in our shared realities.
That's well said, actually, very well said. Did we already discuss? Now I know during the week we were talking about the or I was on another. I did an interview in midweek, and it was crazy about the Anne Frank diary and it's switching to the Diary of a Young Girl. We didn't talk about that.
Yes,
Oh, that was midweek, right? Okay, we didn't
that
talk
was
about that.
crazy, man.
Right? That's huge. That's easily as huge as Ed McMahon, if not one of the biggest changes. And I know we don't talk about generally individual changes. However, this is worthy of that because that is in the curriculum of any, at least Americans, and probably all Westerners in your high school or your middle school curriculums. It's just, holy cow. It's not the Diary of Anne Frank. It's just now it's the Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. So that's insane.
Yes, and there was conjecture. Like when I did a Google search about it, there was a lot of conjecture that some man had written it, and it wasn't even her writings. Like,
What?
at least on the Orion level, they're kind of saying that it wasn't hers.
Oh man, this is like crazy. This is so crazy. And this reminds me of just that whole time period. Like there was such a charge, and there were so many things happening in that era that it's just, I don't know, man. I don't know. I know we're running out of time. The hour is up. It is now 5:30. I want to thank everybody for being here and being with us and just to say thank you. Um, and you can catch us on Twitter all week long. I'm at AI underscore SMQ. Chick, what's your handle again?
At Chick Effect.
Great. And then Buster's at Buster19. Hey Buster, what's your handle? It's I don't usually have to type their handle, so I think it's at Buster 1978 CA, I believe. So everybody, thank you so much for showing up week after week. Great crowd. Thank you for the super chats, everyone. As always, keep it up. So thanks. Talk to you later.
Talk to you soon, everyone.